Welcome to the third and final week of our series, Filters. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Our hope is that over the last few weeks, you've seen the value of guarding your heart and setting up filters in your life. Filters that can help you create healthy boundaries, filter out harmful thoughts, and ultimately set you up to live your best life. And throughout this series, we've also talked about one of the most awkward things you can talk about in church: sex. But here's the deal. I actually think church is the best place to talk about sex. I think church should be the safest place in the world to talk about anything, including the topic of sex. Why? Because teenagers are definitely talking about it, thinking about it, joking about it, and maybe already experimenting with sexual things. And that's why we want to give you a safe place to talk about and ask questions that are important to you. So today, we're going to spend a few more minutes talking about sex.
Okay, now maybe you're sitting here thinking,
Okay, so we're talking about sex at church. Here comes the part where they tell me it's bad and sinful and that I'm too young to be talking about it and I need to stay away from it.
if you're thinking that right now, I totally understand why. When it comes to talking about sex, a lot of people usually do one of three things. They either ignore the conversation at all costs, or they talk about it in a way that makes it seem negative or bad.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die.
Or third, they make sex sound like it's just a casual, no big deal kind of thing. And honestly, none of those options are healthy or helpful. Here's what's true about sex. God created it, and God made sex a good thing, which means he's not embarrassed, uncomfortable, or grossed out by it. It also means that when we have sexual thoughts, desires, and questions, we're totally normal. That's part of being human, because that's how God made us. But here's where it gets confusing. If sex is designed by God and it's good, then why do we hear so many negative things about it? Why do we feel weird or ashamed or scared to even ask about it? Why does it make us feel uncomfortable? And what's the right way to talk about it, think about it, and treat it?
So, what exactly is God's plan for sex?
You ask. Now, there are a lot of different opinions, perspectives, and questions about sex. And not everyone will agree with what we're going to talk about today. And that's okay. But today, we're going to look at what the Bible has to say. Fortunately, God's Word has a lot to say about the subject. The first time that we get a glimpse of God's attitude towards sex is at the very beginning of the Bible in the book of Genesis, where we read about the beginning of creation. So God created human beings in his own image. And in the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. Confused? Let me break it down for you. The word sex isn't actually written in this passage, but it's exactly what's being talked about here. When God told the people he created to be fruitful and multiply, he was telling them to have lots and lots of kids. And in order to have lots and lots of kids, you have to have lots and lots of sex.
Wow.
So basically, God created people and then told them to go have lots of sex. So we've learned two things already. First, we've learned that God invented sex. And second, we've learned that God is definitely in favor of people having sex. This is pretty interesting, considering so many people seem to think that God doesn't like it when people have sex, or think about sex, or talk about sex. But from the very beginning, we see that God made sex, which means that he not only approves of it, he knows a ton about it too, including how it can best be used and enjoyed. You could probably even argue that since God created sex, he knows more about sex than anyone else ever has or ever will. And then in the next chapter of Genesis, we get a little bit more insight into the context in which God designed sex to be enjoyed. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. So God invented sex. It was his idea, and he wants people to have lots of it. But now we also see that sex was created to be enjoyed by a man and a woman who have committed to live their lives together in the context of marriage. From this verse, we can see that sex is powerful. So powerful that it says a man is to be joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. This is talking about the joining of two lives physically, emotionally, and yes, sexually. Another translation says that the two become one flesh. Two people becoming one is is a pretty powerful concept. According to God, sex isn't just some meaningless thing we should do with whoever, whenever. Instead, sex is a very powerful thing. It's a very important thing. According to God's design, sex is the way that two people develop intimacy and oneness between each other. There is power when two people become one. But remember that power can be either good or bad. It all depends on the context. When sex occurs within the right context, it has incredible power for good. But when sex occurs outside of the wrong context, outside of God's design, it has an incredible power for destruction. In the wrong context, sex can be extremely dangerous to us, physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Think of it like this. How many of you have a fireplace in your house? Or maybe you've seen one on TV. You definitely should have seen one on TV. When fire is in a fireplace, it's contained and safe. We know how to take care of it, and we know what it's supposed to do. It provides good things like the right amount of warmth from the cold, a way to make the perfect s'more, and s'mores are so good. A source of light when the power goes out. Sounds pretty great, right? And that's because it is. That's because the fire is contained in a fireplace, in your home. That's how it's designed to be. But what about when the fire starts accidentally in your house? Yikes! It's no longer like this fire here anymore, is it? Nope, not very fun anymore. Because it can get out of control and dangerous fast. When a fire rages throughout your home, it's totally unpredictable, and it has the potential to leave damage, destruction, and pain in its wake. It causes so many unintentional negative results when it goes outside of the safety of the fireplace, when it stops being used in the way it was intended. See, outside of God's plan, sex can impact your life in the same way. It can get out of control really quickly and be totally unpredictable. It can cause a lot of pain to yourself and others, both immediately and in the future. And it can result in outcomes that you totally didn't imagine or ever intend.
So here's what I want you to know today. Sex is good, and sex is powerful. Maybe you know that because you've seen it firsthand. Maybe you've experienced the physical, spiritual, and emotional hurt that comes from sex outside of God's plan. Maybe you've seen it ruin your relationships with a boyfriend or girlfriend. Maybe you've seen it damage relationships with friends or between parents or even you and God. Or maybe you've been sexually abused or harassed and it left you feeling all kinds of things that you know God doesn't want for you to experience. Let me pause here and tell you that if you've been mistreated sexually, it's not your fault. God didn't intend for you to be hurt this way, and that's not his plan for sex. He loves you. He doesn't judge you and wants what's best for your life. And I encourage you to speak to your small group leader today to help you navigate through those experiences. Now, maybe you haven't experienced the emotional, physical, and spiritual effects that sex outside of marriage can potentially cause. Maybe you and your friends are experimenting with sex and sexual acts outside of God's design, but those consequences that you hear everyone talk about, they haven't really happened yet. You may not have seen the negative impact yet, but trust me when I tell you that the potential is there. Sex is so powerful that even when you can't see the consequences of using it outside of God's plan, even if you don't see them for years to come, they're still there. The emotional, spiritual, and physical impact can last a lifetime. And those hurts can affect your current and future relationships in a lot of negative ways. They have the potential to bring pain into the most important relationships in your life. But pain isn't what God wants for you in any area of your life, and especially when it comes to sex. God has a plan for your life, a good plan. And when we trust in following his design for all things in our lives, we can know that we are using the things that he created for us in the best way possible.
To help you start navigating this topic in a way that's good and works for you, here are a couple filters I hope you'll start putting into place in your life. First, you need a boundaries filter. Think about the fence we put that puppy in on week 1. The fence wasn't a bad thing. It was just a way to keep the puppy safe from running off and getting lost or getting hit by a car. Yeah, there were times he jumped up on it and hurting his paws on the side when he tried to, get out, but it overall kept him safe. Boundaries are filters that prevent you from crossing into more dangerous areas of sex outside of the context of marriage. Second, you need an accountability filter. Who is the person you can be real with about the struggles in this area? It might be a small group leader or your parent, but you need somebody who gets you and loves you no matter what. You need somebody who regularly asks you about how you're doing in this area and who's praying for you on a daily basis.
Whew! We did it! We made it through a whole conversation about sex at church. Believe it or not, we want you to experience everything that God has created and designed for you to enjoy when it comes to this topic. Thanks for sticking with me and our team through this important talk. And as you head to small group today, I want you to think about this question. Who is one trusted person that I can talk to when it comes to sex? And what kind of boundaries will protect me? The things I do for you!